In Riverside University's graduation quad, a young woman was about to face her parents' devastating judgment. What started as a family celebration took a shocking turn when they declared their shame in her choices. Jenna Brown wasn't your typical graduate. For 4 years, she had secretly built a social media empire from her dorm room, known for innovative digital marketing strategies. When her parents said, "We're ashamed of you," she had no idea she was walking into vindication. Jenna answered her ringing phone to discover a $50 million acquisition offer that would shatter every assumption about success. What began as crushing rejection would become complete transformation. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across Riverside University's main quad as hundreds of graduates streamed toward the ceremony venue. Jenna Brown adjusted her cap for the third time, the tassel catching briefly in her dark hair as she navigated through clusters of excited families. Around her, the air buzzed with congratulations and camera clicks, parents beaming with pride as they captured every moment of their children's achievement. But when Jenna spotted her parents near the entrance, their expressions told a different story entirely. Dr. Linda Chen stood rigid in her navy blazer, her surgeon's posture perfect but cold. Beside her, David Chen checked his watch, with the same methodical precision he brought to contract negotiations. Neither smiled when they saw their daughter approaching. The contrast was stark. While other families embraced and celebrated, the Chen family maintained the careful distance that had defined their relationship for months. "You made it," Jenna said, forcing brightness into her voice as she reached them. "Of course we made it," her mother replied, her tone clipped. "Despite everything, we wouldn't miss your graduation." The word everything hung heavy between them. Jenna knew exactly what it meant. Her decision to abandon pre-med, her switch to digital media and entrepreneurship, the countless arguments that had defined her senior year. She'd hoped that seeing her actually graduate might soften their disappointment, but one look at their faces told her nothing had changed. "We should find our seats," David said quietly, avoiding his daughter's eyes. "The ceremony starts soon." As they walked toward the main pavilion, Jenna found herself studying the families around them. There was Marcus Chen, no relation, despite the shared surname, whose parents had driven 8 hours from Sacramento to watch him receive his engineering degree. His mother kept dabbing at her eyes with tissues, while his father couldn't stop grinning. 2 rows ahead, she spotted Sarah Williams, whose grandmother had flown in from Puerto Rico specifically for this day, chattering excitedly in rapid Spanish while Sarah laughed and translated. These were the graduation moments Jenna had imagined for herself. The pride, the celebration, the sense that years of hard work had culminated in something worthy of recognition. Instead, she felt like she was walking to her own trial. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of speeches and academic processions. Dean Morrison spoke about following dreams and forging new paths in an uncertain world. The valedictorian discussed the courage required to pursue unconventional wisdom. Jenna found herself wondering if her parents were listening to any of it, or if they were too busy cataloging all the ways their daughter had failed to meet their standards. When her name was called, Jenna Brown, Bachelor of Arts in Digital Media and Entrepreneurship, summa cum laude, she heard a polite smattering of applause from her parents' section. Nothing like the whoops and cheers that erupted when other students crossed the stage. She shook the dean's hand, accepted her diploma, and tried to pretend the academic honor cords around her neck carried the same weight as the pre-med track she'd abandoned. The real confrontation came afterward, when families dispersed across the quad for photographs and private celebrations. Jenna had barely made it 10 steps from the ceremony area when her mother's voice cut through the ambient celebration. "We need to talk." Dr. Linda Chen led them to a quieter corner near the library, away from the main crowd. David followed silently, his lawyer's training evident in the way he positioned himself, close enough to be part of the conversation, far enough to maintain some emotional distance. Jenna clutched her diploma, the parchment suddenly feeling flimsy in her hands. 4 years, her mother began, her voice steady but cold. 4 years of preparation for medical school. 4 years of building toward something meaningful, something stable, and you threw it all away for What exactly? Mom, I graduated summa cum laude. I built something real. You build fantasies, Linda interrupted. Social media management? Digital marketing? These aren't careers, Jenna. They're hobbies for people who can afford to play with their futures. The words hit like physical blows. Jenna had prepared for this conversation, had rehearsed her arguments about the digital economy and the legitimacy of her field. But standing there in her graduation gown, listening to her mother's dismissal, she felt every bit of confidence drain away. Your mother's right, David added, though his tone carried less conviction. We've sacrificed everything to give you opportunities we never had. Medical school would have meant security, respect, a career that matters. Instead, you've chosen uncertainty. Jenna's throat tightened. She thought about the late nights in her dorm room, the careful budgeting to fund her projects, the small victories that had built into something larger than she'd ever imagined. But how could she explain any of that when her parents saw only waste and disappointment? I know you don't understand my choices, she began carefully, but I'm good at this. Really good. I've been building something. Building what? Linda's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby families. She lowered it again, but the intensity remained. A website? A social media account? Jenna, I worked 3 jobs while completing medical school. Your father studied for the bar exam while working 60-hour weeks. We built real careers, with real stability, because we understood the value of sacrifice. The comparison stung because Jenna knew her parents' story intimately. Linda had immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but determination and a fierce belief in the American dream of upward mobility through education. David had followed a similar path, climbing from poverty to partnership at a prestigious law firm through sheer force of will and traditional achievement. They saw their daughter's unconventional choices not just as foolish, but as a rejection of everything they'd worked to provide. You want to know the truth? Linda continued, her composure finally cracking. We're ashamed of you. Not because you're not smart enough, you've always been brilliant, but because you've chosen to waste that brilliance on something so frivolous. The words landed like a physical blow. Ashamed of her. On what should have been one of the proudest days of her life, the 2 people whose approval mattered most had just declared their shame in her choices. Jenna felt tears threatening, but refused to let them fall. Around them, other families continued their celebrations, oblivious to the quiet devastation playing out in their corner of the quad. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, to make them understand that their definition of success wasn't the only valid one, but the weight of their disappointment pressed down on her like a physical force. I'm sorry you feel that way, she managed, her voice barely steady. But this is who I am. This is what I'm good at. I can't apologize for pursuing something I'm passionate about. Passion doesn't pay medical school debt, David said quietly. Passion doesn't provide security for a family. Passion is a luxury for people who don't understand what real struggle looks like. Before Jenna could respond, her phone began to ring. The sound cut through the heavy silence between them, jarring and insistent. She glanced at the screen, expecting to see Alex's name, or maybe one of her classmates wanting to coordinate post-graduation plans. Instead, she saw a number she recognized, but had never expected to see calling her directly. James Morrison, CEO of TechVantage Industries. Her heart stopped. She'd been in preliminary discussions with several companies about potential partnerships, but TechVantage was in a completely different league. The fact that Morrison himself was calling, on graduation day no less, could only mean one thing. The phone continued to ring as her parents watched with growing confusion. Jenna stared at the screen, her mind racing. This call could change everything, or it could be nothing more than a polite rejection delivered personally. Either way, she knew with absolute certainty that whatever Morrison had to say would alter the trajectory of this conversation with her parents. Aren't you going to answer that? Linda asked, irritation creeping into her voice. Jenna looked up at her parents, at their stern faces, their obvious disappointment, their complete inability to see past their own definitions of success. Then she looked back at the phone, still ringing insistently in her hand. Yes, she said quietly. I think I am. Jenna's finger hovered over the answer button as her parents watched with mounting impatience. The name James Morrison, TechVantage Industries, glowed on her screen like a beacon in the suffocating atmosphere of their disappointment. She had dreamed of this moment countless times over the past 6 months, but never imagined it would come at the exact instant her family was declaring their shame in her life choices. "Hello, this is Jenna," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Jenna Brown?" The voice on the other end carried the confident authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that moved markets. "This is James Morrison from TechVantage Industries. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." A bitter laugh almost escaped her lips. Bad time didn't begin to cover it. "Actually, I just finished my graduation ceremony," she managed, watching her parents' confused expressions as they tried to make sense of this unexpected interruption. "Congratulations," Morrison said, and she could hear genuine warmth in his voice. "That's actually perfect timing for what I'm calling about. Jenna, I'll cut straight to the point. My team and I have been following ConnectCore's growth over the past 18 months, and frankly, we're impressed. Very impressed." Jenna's heart began to race. ConnectCore. He was talking about her company, the business she'd built in secret, the venture her parents didn't even know existed. She glanced at Dr. Linda Chen, whose surgeon's training had clearly kicked in as she analyzed every micro-expression on her daughter's face, searching for clues about this mysterious conversation. "We'd like to make you an offer," Morrison continued. "A formal acquisition offer. Are you somewhere you can talk privately?" Jenna looked around the quad, at the celebrating families, at her parents standing just 2 feet away with their arms crossed in identical poses of disapproval. Private was the last thing this moment could be called. "I'm with family right now," she said carefully. "But I can listen." "Understood. Here's what we're prepared to offer. $50 million for a complete acquisition of ConnectCore, including all proprietary algorithms, client relationships, and intellectual property. The deal would include a 3-year employment contract for you as Director of Digital Innovation, with full autonomy over your current projects, and a substantial equity stake in TechVantage's digital division." The words hit her like a physical force. $50 million. She had known ConnectCore was valuable. Her client retention rate was unprecedented. Her predictive analytics had helped dozens of companies triple their social media engagement, and her proprietary platform was already being copied by competitors. But $50 million was beyond her wildest projections. She began, then stopped. Her mother was leaning closer now, clearly trying to overhear the conversation. David had pulled out his phone, probably to check his own messages, but his attention was still focused on his daughter's increasingly bewildered expression. "I realize this is a lot to process," Morrison said, misinterpreting her silence. "And I want to be clear, this isn't a lowball opening offer. We've done extensive due diligence on your company, Jenna. Your client acquisition model is revolutionary. The way you've integrated predictive analytics with personalized content creation. Honestly, it's what social media management should have been from the beginning." Jenna felt tears threatening again, but for entirely different reasons now. For 4 years, she had worked in isolation, building something she believed in, while facing constant pressure to abandon it. She had funded ConnectCore through part-time jobs and small business loans, maxing out credit cards to pay for server costs and software licenses. She had sacrificed sleep, social activities, and her relationship with her family to nurture this vision. And now James Morrison. James Morrison, whose company had revolutionized 3 different tech sectors over the past decade, was telling her it was worth $50 million. "The timeline we're looking at is fairly aggressive," Morrison continued. "We'd want to finalize terms within the next 2 weeks. I know that's fast, but the digital landscape moves quickly, and we believe ConnectCore's methodology could transform our entire approach to client engagement. Would you be available to fly out to San Francisco early next week? I'd like you to meet with our full executive team and see our facilities." "Yes," Jenna heard herself saying. "Yes, I could do that." "Excellent. My assistant will send you the preliminary offer documents this afternoon, along with travel arrangements. And Jenna, congratulations again, both on your graduation and on building something truly remarkable." Not many people your age have the vision to see where social media marketing was heading, much less the skill to build a platform that anticipates those changes. The call ended, leaving Jenna staring at her phone in stunned silence. Around her, the graduation celebration continued, families posing for photos, graduates hugging friends, the normal joy of academic achievement. But she felt suspended in a bubble of surreal disbelief. "Well," Linda's voice cut through her daze, "who was that? And why did they sound like they were discussing business with you?" Jenna looked up at her parents, Dr. Linda Chen, who had just declared her shame in her daughter's choices, David Chen, who had dismissed her passion as a luxury for people who didn't understand real struggle. They were staring at her with confusion and growing suspicion, clearly sensing that something significant had just occurred, but unable to piece together what it might be. "That was James Morrison," Jenna said slowly, her voice carrying a strange new quality she didn't recognize. "He's the CEO of TechVantage Industries." "And?" Linda prompted impatiently. Jenna took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 4 years of secrets pressing against her chest. The weight of late nights and financial risks, and the constant fear that she was disappointing the people who had sacrificed everything for her success. The weight of choosing between her authentic self and her family's approval. "And he just offered to buy my company for $50 million. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Her parents' expressions shifted from confusion to disbelief to something approaching shock. Other families continued celebrating around them, but in their small corner of the quad, everything had gone perfectly, impossibly still. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Dr. Linda Chen's mouth opened slightly, then closed again, her surgeon's composure momentarily shattered. David Chen had gone completely still, his phone forgotten in his hand as he stared at his daughter with an expression she'd never seen before, a mixture of confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been the beginning of recognition. "Your company?" Linda's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "What company?" Jenna felt a strange calm settling over her, the kind of clarity that comes when a long-held secret finally demands to be spoken. She looked around the quad, noting the family still celebrating nearby, then back at her parents. This conversation would change everything between them, and there was no going back. "ConnectCore," she said simply. "It's a social media management and analytics company. I founded it freshman year with my roommate, Alex Rivera." "That's impossible," Linda said, her voice gaining strength. "You've been pre-med this entire time. You've been taking organic chemistry, biology, physics." "For 2 semesters. Jenna interrupted gently. "I switched my major to digital media and entrepreneurship at the end of freshman year. I've been running ConnectCore for the past 3.5 years. David finally found his voice. "The study groups, the late nights in the library, the times you couldn't come home for dinner because of lab work, client meetings, strategy sessions, building something I believed in while trying to maintain grades good enough to keep you from asking too many questions." Jenna's voice carried no defiance now, just tired honesty. "I graduated summa cum laude in my actual major, Dad. The one I chose." Linda took a step back, as if physical distance might help her process this revelation. "This is ridiculous. You're 22 years old. You don't just build companies. Real companies. Companies worth," she struggled with the number, $50 million. "I do, though," Jenna said, and for the first time all day, her voice carried complete confidence. "We started with local businesses, cafes, boutiques, small restaurants that needed help with their social media presence. But we didn't just post pretty pictures. We developed algorithms that could predict optimal posting times, content that would drive engagement, strategies that actually converted followers into customers." She pulled out her phone, scrolling to ConnectCore's client portfolio. "See this restaurant in downtown Portland? We increased their social media engagement by 400% in 6 months. Their revenue went up 30%. This fitness studio in Austin? They went from struggling to stay open to having a waiting list for classes." David leaned in to look at the screen, his lawyer's analytical mind automatically engaging. "These are real businesses. Real results." "Of course they're real," Jenna said, feeling a flicker of the old frustration. Did you think I was playing games for 4 years? Alex and I have been working 16-hour days, taking business loans, reinvesting every penny back into the company. We have 43 employees now, offices in 3 cities, and a client retention rate of 96%. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Linda's world was visibly shifting. Everything she thought she knew about her daughter's college experience was being rewritten in real time. But the money. Where did you get the capital to start something like this? Part-time jobs at first. I worked at the campus coffee shop, did freelance graphic design, tutored other students. Then small business loans when we started growing. I maxed out 3 credit cards in sophomore year to pay for server costs. Jenna's voice grew quieter. There were nights I survived on ramen noodles for weeks because every dollar went back into the business. The image this painted, their daughter struggling financially while they assumed she was simply focused on her studies, clearly shook both parents. David ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Jenna recognized as his way of processing overwhelming information. Why didn't you tell us? He asked. If you were building something real, something successful, why keep it secret? Jenna looked at him with something approaching sympathy. Because of this. Because of the conversation we just had 10 minutes ago. Because you told me my passion was a luxury for people who don't understand real struggle. Because Mom said she was ashamed of me for choosing digital media over pre-med. The words landed like accusations, which Jenna realized they were. Her parents had created an environment where honesty felt impossible, where their love seemed conditional on her, following a predetermined path. But $50 million, Linda said, still grappling with the scope of what she was learning. Companies that size don't just appear overnight. They don't, Jenna agreed. ConnectCore has been featured in Forbes, TechCrunch, and the Wall Street Journal. We've spoken at 3 major industry conferences. Sarah Kim, she runs Kim Corp Marketing. She's been our mentor for 2 years. She says what we've built is the future of social media management. She scrolled through her phone again, showing them screenshots of articles, testimonials, industry recognition. TechVantage Industries isn't the first company to approach us. We've had acquisition offers before, but James Morrison's company is different. They understand what we're trying to accomplish. David was studying the information with his lawyer's eye for detail, and she could see the exact moment when the reality of her achievement hit him. His daughter hadn't just built a hobby business. She had created something that industry leaders considered revolutionary. The call today, he said slowly. That wasn't the first time you'd spoken with them. We've been in negotiations for 6 months. But today was the first time Morrison called with a formal offer. Jenna's voice softened. I never imagined it would happen right after you told me you were ashamed of my choices. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. At the exact moment her parents had declared their disappointment in her unconventional path, that path had revealed itself to be more successful than anything they had imagined possible. Linda was staring at her daughter as if seeing her for the first time. The young woman standing before her wasn't the confused, directionless student she had assumed, but an entrepreneur who had quietly built something extraordinary while maintaining the facade of academic compliance. I need to sit down, Linda said quietly. The organic chemistry lab smelled like sulfur and broken dreams. Jenna Brown stared at her third failed synthesis attempt of the week, watching the clear solution in her beaker turn an ominous shade of brown that definitely wasn't supposed to happen according to the lab manual. Around her, pre-med students hunched over their experiments with the intense focus of people whose entire futures depended on mastering molecular structures. Need help? Alex Rivera appeared at her elbow, his own perfectly crystallized compound glinting under the fluorescent lights. Where Jenna struggled, Alex seemed to navigate chemistry with an intuitive understanding that made her simultaneously grateful and envious. I think I'm cursed, Jenna muttered, cleaning her glassware for the 4th time. Or maybe organic chemistry is just the universe's way of telling me I'm not cut out for medical school. Alex glanced around to make sure Professor Williams wasn't within earshot. There's no law that says you have to be pre-med just because you're smart. Half the people in this lab are only here because their parents decided their career path before they could walk. The comment hit closer to home than Jenna cared to admit. Dr. Linda Chen had been planning her daughter's medical career since Jenna aced her first high school biology test. David Chen had already researched medical school admission statistics and started a savings account specifically for MCAT prep courses. The expectation wasn't just clear, it was carved in stone. Easy for you to say, Jenna replied, finally achieving a solution that wasn't actively changing colors. Your parents aren't surgeons who immigrated halfway across the world specifically so their daughter could have opportunities they never had. True, Alex said thoughtfully. But my parents also aren't paying $40,000 a year for me to be miserable in a career I hate before I even start it. That afternoon, Jenna sat in her dorm room staring at her chemistry textbook with the same enthusiasm she might reserve for root canal surgery. Her roommate had gone home for the weekend, leaving her alone with the oppressive silence that always seemed to amplify her growing doubts about the pre-med track. Instead of studying molecular orbital theory, she found herself scrolling through social media, something her parents would have classified as pure procrastination. But as she browsed, her mind began working in ways that organic chemistry never seemed to engage. She noticed patterns, which posts generated the most engagement, how timing affected visibility, why some content went viral while similar posts disappeared without a trace. The local coffee shop where she worked part-time, The Daily Grind, had been struggling with their online presence. Their Instagram account had 47 followers, most of whom were employees and their immediate family members. Their posts consisted mainly of blurry photos of coffee cups taken with poor lighting, usually accompanied by captions like, "Good coffee today," or "Come in for caffeine." On impulse, Jenna opened her laptop and began drafting a social media strategy for The Daily Grind. She analyzed their peak hours, researched local hashtags, and created a content calendar that would showcase not just their coffee, but the community atmosphere that made the place special. She designed graphics highlighting their locally sourced beans, photographed their cozy reading nooks during golden hour, and crafted captions that told stories rather than just announcing products. 3 hours later, she had created a comprehensive social media plan that felt more energizing than anything she'd accomplished in organic chemistry all semester. "What are you working on?" Alex asked when he returned from his weekend trip home, finding Jenna surrounded by printouts and laptop screens. "Probably wasting time," Jenna said, but she showed him the social media strategy anyway. "The coffee shop where I work has terrible online presence. I was just, seeing if I could figure out how to improve it." Alex studied the materials with the same focused attention he brought to his chemistry experiments. "This is incredible. Look at this analysis of optimal posting times. You've basically reverse-engineered their customer flow patterns from social media engagement data." "It's just observations," Jenna said, though she felt a flutter of pride at his enthusiasm. "This is way more sophisticated than just observations. You've identified their target demographic, created content pillars that align with their brand values, and developed a metric system for measuring ROI on social media investment." Alex looked up from the papers. "Jenna, this is the kind of strategy that marketing firms charge thousands of dollars to develop." The next Monday, Jenna nervously approached her manager at The Daily Grind with her proposal. Sarah Kim, the owner, was a woman in her 40s who had left a corporate marketing career to pursue her dream of running a community coffee shop. She listened to Jenna's presentation with the attention of someone who understood both the creative and business sides of entrepreneurship. "This is professional-level work," Sarah said when Jenna finished. "Where did you learn to do this kind of analysis?" "I honestly don't know," Jenna admitted. "I was supposed to be studying chemistry, but I kept getting distracted by trying to understand why some social media posts work and others don't." Sarah smiled. "Sometimes the things that distract us from what we're supposed to be doing are actually pointing us toward what we're meant to be doing." Within a month of implementing Jenna's strategy, The Daily Grind's Instagram followers had increased from 47 to over 800. More importantly, Sarah reported a noticeable increase in new customers, many of whom mentioned finding the cafe through social media. You have a gift for this, Sarah told Jenna as they reviewed the month's engagement statistics. Have you considered that maybe your future isn't in medicine? The question terrified Jenna because she had been considering it. Despite every family conversation about her future being built around medical school applications and MCAT scores, for the first time in her academic career, she had found something that felt less like work and more like solving fascinating puzzles. That night, she called Alex with a proposition that would change both their lives. I want to start a company, she said without preamble when he answered. A social media management company. And I want you to be my partner. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Jenna began to worry she had overstepped. Then Alex's voice came through, excited and slightly breathless. I was wondering when you were going to ask. The abandoned study room in the basement of the library became their headquarters by necessity rather than choice. Room B12 smelled like old books and industrial carpet, and the fluorescent light flickered with the persistence of a dying moth. But it was tucked away enough that Jenna and Alex could spread their laptops, client files, and strategy documents across 3 tables without attracting attention from students who might ask uncomfortable questions. Okay, so Martinez Landscaping wants to increase their spring bookings by 40%. Alex said, pulling up their newest client's account on his laptop. Their current Instagram has, he squinted at the screen, 32 followers. And their last post was from 8 months ago. It's a picture of a lawnmower. Jenna laughed, despite the stress that had become her constant companion. Remember when we thought the daily grind was a challenge? At least Sarah knew what social media was. ConnectCore had grown from their coffee shop success into something neither of them had anticipated. Word of mouth in their small college town had brought them 5 clients by the end of freshman year, then 12 by Christmas of sophomore year. Now halfway through their junior year, they were managing social media strategies for 23 businesses across 3 states. And Jenna was running on approximately 4 hours of sleep per night. Did you finish the content calendar for the Portland Bakery? She asked, while simultaneously responding to comments on the Austin Yoga Studios Facebook page and reviewing analytics for their biggest client, a boutique marketing firm in Seattle. Uploaded this morning, 48 posts scheduled for the next month, all optimized for their peak engagement times. Alex paused his typing to rub his eyes. Speaking of which, when was the last time either of us got a full night's sleep? Jenna couldn't remember. The past 6 months had blurred into a continuous cycle of classes, client work, and increasingly elaborate lies to her parents about why she couldn't come home for dinner, or why she needed to stay on campus during spring break. Every family phone call was a minefield of questions about her studies, her grades, her medical school preparation. How are your organic chemistry labs going? Her mother had asked just last week during their Sunday call. Fine, Jenna had replied, which was technically true since she'd dropped organic chemistry 8 months earlier when she changed her major to digital media and entrepreneurship. Her parents still believed she was pre-med, still planning for MCAT prep courses and medical school applications. The deception was eating at her, but the alternative felt impossible. How could she explain to Dr. Linda Chen that her daughter was spending 60 hours a week building something her mother would consider frivolous? How could she tell David Chen that instead of preparing for the stable, prestigious career he'd sacrificed to make possible, she was taking business loans and maxing out credit cards to fund server costs for a company that existed primarily on the internet? We need better project management software, Alex said, interrupting her spiraling thoughts, and probably a real office space. I love our basement study room, but we're managing nearly $2 million in client social media budgets from a place that smells like mildew. The numbers still surprised Jenna when she thought about them. ConnectCore's clients weren't huge corporations, but their combined social media advertising budgets, follower counts, and revenue increases created metrics that looked impressive, even in industry publications. They had developed proprietary algorithms for predicting optimal content timing, created templated strategies that could be customized for different business types, and achieved client retention rates that established marketing firms envied. Sarah Kim called yesterday, Jenna said, referencing their original coffee shop client who had become an unofficial mentor. She wants to introduce us to some of her contacts in the broader marketing world. Apparently, word is getting around about what we're doing. Alex looked up from his laptop with interest. What kind of contacts? Bigger companies, regional chains, tech startups, maybe even some national brands. Jenna felt the familiar mix of excitement and terror that accompanied every new opportunity. But it would mean scaling up significantly. More employees, real infrastructure, actual business insurance. And probably harder to hide from your parents, Alex added gently. The elephant in the room. Jenna's double life was becoming increasingly unsustainable as ConnectCore grew. She had managed to maintain her grades, a 3.7 GPA in her actual major was nothing to apologize for, but the mental and emotional toll of constantly managing two completely different versions of herself was exhausting. I got a credit card offer yesterday, she said quietly. $20,000 limit. I was actually considering it to cover our server expansion costs. Alex frowned. Jenna, that's the fourth card you've maxed out in 6 months. We're making good money, but we're also reinvesting every penny. When was the last time you actually paid yourself? She couldn't remember that either. Every dollar ConnectCore generated went back into the business. Better software, more server capacity, occasional contractor help when their workload became overwhelming. Jenna was living on her part-time job income and whatever financial aid her parents hadn't already allocated to her supposed pre-med expenses. We're building something real, she said, more to convince herself than Alex. Sarah says companies our size usually take 5 to 7 years to reach the metrics we've hit in 2 years. We're ahead of every projection. I know. And I believe in what we're doing. But, Jenna. Alex's voice carried the concern of someone who had watched his best friend push herself past reasonable limits for months. You can't keep living like this. The secrecy, the financial stress, the constant exhaustion. Something has to give. That night, alone in her dorm room, Jenna stared at her laptop screen, showing ConnectCore's dashboard. Their client list had grown to include businesses in 7 states. Their content strategies had generated over 40 million social media impressions in the past quarter. They had helped dozens of small businesses increase their revenue, expand their customer base, and build sustainable online communities. By every objective measure, ConnectCore was a success story. But Jenna felt like she was drowning in the space between who she really was and who her family needed her to be. The Forbes article arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, buried in Jenna's email notifications between a client approval request and a reminder about her international marketing final exam. The subject line read simply, Feature Interview Rising Stars in Social Media Management. Jenna's heart stopped. She had agreed to the interview 3 weeks earlier, thinking it would be good publicity for ConnectCore. The journalist, Maria Santos, had been professional and thorough, asking detailed questions about their business model, growth strategies, and vision for the future of social media marketing. But sitting in her dorm room, staring at the email, Jenna realized she hadn't fully considered what it would mean to have her name and photo in a major business publication. Alex, she called across their shared workspace. They'd finally rented a small office space near campus, though she still told her parents she was spending her time in the library. We might have a problem. Alex looked up from his laptop where he was reviewing analytics for their newest client, a chain of fitness studios that had tripled their membership in the 6 months since ConnectCore took over their social media strategy. What kind of problem? The kind where my face is about to be in Forbes magazine, alongside an article titled, How 2 College Students Built a $1 Million Social Media Empire. The color drained from Alex's face. Tell me you're joking. Jenna forwarded him the email. They both stared at her laptop screen in silence, watching the future complications unfold in their minds. Dr. Linda Chen might not read Forbes regularly, but David Chen certainly did. Every lawyer at his firm probably had subscriptions. The article was scheduled to publish in 2 days. Okay, Alex said, his voice unnaturally calm. This is manageable. Maybe your parents won't see it. Maybe. My dad reads Forbes religiously, Jenna interrupted. He quotes it at dinner parties. There's literally no scenario where this article exists and my parents don't find out about it. The weight of 3 years of deception pressed down on her like a physical force. She had always known this moment would come eventually. ConnectCore was too successful to remain hidden forever, but she had imagined it happening on her own terms, Maybe after graduation, when she could present her parents with concrete evidence of her success. Not like this, with a magazine article that would explode her carefully maintained fiction without warning. "What are you going to do?" Alex asked. "I have no idea." The article published on Thursday. By Friday afternoon, Jenna's phone had 17 missed calls from her mother and 12 from her father. Her voicemail box was full of increasingly frantic messages demanding explanations for what Dr. Linda Chen described as this ridiculous magazine story that can't possibly be about our daughter. Jenna couldn't bring herself to listen to all of them, but the few she played were enough to understand that her parents weren't just confused. They were furious about what they perceived as an elaborate lie that had been unfolding for years. "We need to talk," David's final message said, his lawyer voice in full effect. "This weekend. No excuses, no delays. You will come home and explain what this article means." But the weekend brought its own crisis. ConnectCore's biggest client, a regional restaurant chain with 47 locations across the Pacific Northwest, was in the middle of a social media disaster. A disgruntled employee had posted inflammatory content on their official accounts, creating a viral backlash that threatened to destroy years of brand-building work. Jenna spent Saturday and Sunday in crisis management mode, coordinating with the client's PR team, developing response strategies, and monitoring social media metrics that fluctuated by the hour. By Sunday night, they had contained the damage and actually turned the situation into a positive story about corporate responsibility and employee relations. But Jenna was exhausted, and her parents were beyond furious about her failure to come home. "This is exactly what we were afraid of." Linda's voice was ice cold during their Monday morning phone call. "You've gotten involved in something that's consuming your life, distracting you from your real responsibilities. Medical school applications are due in 6 weeks, Jenna. 6 weeks. Have you even started your personal statement?" The personal statement. From medical school she had no intention of attending, to pursue a career she had never wanted. Jenna closed her eyes and tried to imagine writing about her passion for medicine, her dedication to healing, her vision for her future as a physician. The words felt like ash in her mouth. "I need more time," she said weakly. "Time for what? To continue this? This fantasy that you can build a career out of posting pictures on the internet?" Linda's voice rose. "Jenna, I don't care what that magazine article says. Social media management is not a real career. It's not stable, it's not respectable, and it's not what we've sacrificed everything to make possible for you." The conversation ended with Linda demanding that Jenna withdraw from any extracurricular activities that were distracting her from medical school preparation, which would mean shutting down ConnectCore entirely, abandoning the 26 employees they now had across 3 offices, walking away from clients who depended on their expertise. That afternoon, sitting in their main office space, a converted warehouse that hummed with the energy of a thriving business, Jenna looked around at the team they had built. Sophia was creating content strategies for new client acquisitions. Marcus was analyzing engagement metrics that would inform their next algorithm update. Jennifer was on a video call with a potential client in Denver, explaining how ConnectCore's approach differed from traditional marketing firms. These weren't people playing games on the internet. They were skilled professionals building careers in a growing industry, creating real value for businesses across the country. ConnectCore had helped hundreds of companies increase their revenue, expand their customer base, and build meaningful connections with their communities. But try as she might, Jenna couldn't imagine a way to make her parents understand any of that. "Bad day?" Sarah Kim appeared in the doorway of Jenna's office. Their original coffee shop client had become both a mentor and something of a surrogate mother figure over the past 3 years, offering business advice and emotional support in equal measure. "My parents want me to shut down the company and go to medical school," Jenna said without preamble. Sarah closed the door and sat down across from Jenna's desk. "And what do you want?" It was such a simple question, but Jenna realized no one had asked her that in months. Everyone assumed they knew what she should want. Her parents wanted her to choose security and prestige. Her team wanted her to choose the business they had all built together. Industry publications wanted her to be a success story that validated their coverage of emerging markets. But what did Jenna herself actually want? I want my parents to be proud of me, she said quietly, and I want to keep building Connect Core. I just don't know how to have both. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. You know, when I left corporate marketing to open the Daily Grind, my own mother thought I had lost my mind. She couldn't understand why I would abandon a stable career to sell coffee to college students. What changed her mind? Time, success, and eventually, seeing how much happier I was doing work that mattered to me. Sarah paused. But mostly, it was realizing that her definition of success wasn't the only valid one. As Jenna walked back to campus that evening, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is James Morrison from TechVantage Industries. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership with Connect Core. Are you available for a preliminary conversation? She stared at the message, recognizing the name from various business publications. TechVantage Industries was exactly the kind of company that could take Connect Core from successful startup to industry leader. It was also the kind of opportunity that would make hiding her entrepreneurial life completely impossible. Standing there on the sidewalk between her business and her dorm room, between her authentic self and her parents' expectations, Jenna realized that the moment of truth was no longer months away. It was here. The silence in the coffee shop felt suffocating. Jenna had suggested they move somewhere more private after her revelation in the quad, and the Daily Grind, the same cafe where her entrepreneurial journey had begun, seemed fitting for this conversation. Sarah Kim had graciously offered them the back room after hours, understanding without explanation that the Chen family needed space to process what had just been revealed. Dr. Linda Chen sat rigidly in her chair, her surgeon's hands folded precisely in her lap, but Jenna could see the tremor in her fingers that betrayed her emotional state. David Chen was staring at his coffee cup as if it might contain answers to questions he hadn't known to ask. The weight of 3.5 years of deception hung between them like a physical presence. $50 million, Linda said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. You're telling me that while we were worried about your grades, your future, your stability, you were building something worth $50 million. The company is worth that, yes, Jenna said carefully. Alex and I own it together, so $25 million. David's lawyer mind had immediately calculated the split. You're 22 years old, and you're worth $25 million. The number seemed to echo in the small space. Jenna watched her parents grapple with a reality that contradicted everything they thought they knew about success, stability, and their daughter's capabilities. How? Linda's composure finally cracked completely. How did we not know? How did you hide something this enormous from us for years? Before Jenna could answer, the door opened and Jenny Chen slipped inside. Her 17-year-old sister had been texting frantically since the graduation ceremony, and Jenna had finally told her where they were. Jenny took one look at the tense scene and immediately understood that the family crisis she'd been anticipating had finally arrived. Did you tell them about Connect Core? Jenny asked, sliding into the chair next to Jenna. The question hit the room like a thunderbolt. You knew? Linda's voice rose an octave. You knew about this company? Jenny's expression shifted from casual support to defensive protectiveness. Of course I knew. I've known for 2 years. Jenna's been featured in magazines, Mom. She's spoken at conferences. She's built something incredible. And you said nothing. David's voice carried the sharp edge he usually reserved for opposing counsel. Your sister has been lying to us for years, and you said nothing? She wasn't lying, Jenny shot back with surprising fire. She was protecting herself. Do you have any idea what it's been like watching her kill herself trying to be perfect in a field she never wanted to pursue? Do you know how many nights she's cried on the phone with me because she was terrified of disappointing you? Jenna stared at her younger sister in amazement. She had never realized Jenny understood the depth of her struggle, had never known their late-night conversations had revealed so much. We're her parents, Linda said, her voice breaking slightly. We deserve to know what's happening in her life. Do you? Jenny's voice was steady but challenging. Because from where I've been sitting, it seems like you only want to know the parts of her life that match what you've decided she should be. The accusation hung in the air. Jenna could see her parents processing this perspective from their younger daughter. Someone they had never considered might have insights into family dynamics they'd assumed were private. That's not fair, David said quietly. Everything we've done has been for both of you. Every sacrifice, every long workday, every dollar saved for your education. It's all been about creating opportunities we never had. I know, Jenna said, her voice gentle but firm, and I'm grateful for all of it. But Mom, Dad, the opportunities you created included the opportunity for me to discover what I'm actually good at, what I'm passionate about, what makes me feel like I'm contributing something meaningful to the world. Linda looked up sharply. Medicine contributes to the world. Surgery saves lives. What you're doing helps businesses thrive, Jenna interrupted. Helps families support themselves. Helps communities stay connected. The restaurant in Portland that was about to close before we took over their social media? They now employ 47 people. The fitness studio in Austin? They've become a community center where people struggling with depression and anxiety have found support systems that literally save lives. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through testimonials and client success stories. This isn't just posting pictures on the internet. We've helped create jobs, preserve family businesses, build communities. Is that somehow less valuable than surgery? David studied the testimonials with growing interest, his analytical mind engaging with the data. These are substantial impacts, he admitted. Revenue increases, job creation, community engagement metrics. David? Linda's voice carried a warning. No, Linda, look at this. He showed her the phone screen. This is real business impact, real economic development. Our daughter hasn't been wasting her time. She's been building something that creates measurable value in the world. For the first time since the revelation began, Jenna saw something shift in her father's expression. The rigid disappointment was being replaced by something that looked almost like curiosity. But the secrecy, Linda said, still struggling. The lies. How can we trust anything now? Jenna felt tears threatening, but pushed them back. Because I was terrified of this conversation. Because I knew you'd see my choices as a betrayal of everything you'd worked for. Because I love you both so much that the thought of disappointing you felt worse than living a double life. Jenny reached over and took her sister's hand. She's been protecting you too, you know. Protecting you from having to admit that your definition of success might not be the only right one. The observation seemed to hit Linda like a physical blow. She stared at her younger daughter, then at Jenna, processing the possibility that her rigid expectations had created exactly the kind of family dysfunction she had been trying to prevent. James Morrison called me personally, Jenna said quietly. TechVantage Industries has been tracking our growth for months. They don't acquire companies as investments. They acquire companies that are changing their industries. Whatever I've built, it's significant enough that one of the most successful tech companies in the country wants to buy it. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different. Less accusatory, more contemplative. Finally, David spoke. We need to hear the whole story. From the beginning. Everything. Jenna looked at her parents. Really looked at them. And saw something she hadn't expected. Beneath the hurt and confusion. Beneath the rigid expectations and immigrant fears about stability. She saw people who were genuinely trying to understand a world that had changed around them. Okay, she said. I'll tell you everything. Sarah Kim's office occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city that had become ConnectCore's unofficial headquarters. Jenna sat nervously in the waiting area, checking her phone for the third time in 5 minutes. Her parents were 15 minutes late, and she was beginning to wonder if they had changed their minds about this meeting. They'll be here, Sarah said, emerging from her office with the confident bearing that had made her one of the most respected marketing executives in the Pacific Northwest. Your father called 10 minutes ago. Parking downtown is apparently more complicated than corporate law. Jenna managed a weak smile. The past 2 days had been surreal, filled with tense family conversations that oscillated between tentative understanding and lingering hurt. Her parents were trying, she could see that. But decades of thinking about success in terms of medical degrees and law partnerships weren't easily overturned by a single revelation, even one involving $50 million. The elevator chimed, and David Chen emerged first, followed by Dr. Linda Chen. Both looked slightly overwhelmed by the modern corporate environment, clearly outside their usual professional comfort zones. Jenna's mother wore the same navy blazer she'd worn to graduation, but she'd traded her stern expression for something more cautious, the look of someone preparing to have their worldview challenged. "Dr. Chen, Mr. Chen," Sarah greeted them with professional warmth. "Thank you for coming. I know this situation has been unexpected for your family." "That's an understatement," Linda replied, but her tone lacked the sharp edge it had carried during their coffee shop confrontation. "We're still trying to understand what our daughter has been building." Sarah gestured toward her conference room where she had prepared what looked like a formal business presentation. "That's exactly what I hope to help with today. Please, have a seat. Can I get you coffee? Water?" As they settled around the polished conference table, Jenna noticed her father's eyes scanning the office with professional interest. Awards lined the walls, recognition from industry organizations, certificates of partnership with major corporations, photos of Sarah with various business leaders and politicians. This wasn't the office of someone playing with internet trends. This was the headquarters of a serious business operation. "Before we discuss ConnectCore specifically," Sarah began, "I want to give you some context about the digital marketing industry. 5 years ago, many traditional businesses viewed social media marketing the way you might view it now, as something frivolous, temporary, not quite legitimate. Today, it's a $40 billion industry that drives consumer behavior across every sector of the economy." She clicked a remote, and the wall-mounted screen displayed a series of statistics and graphs. 78% of consumers discover new products through social media. 63% of businesses say their social media marketing efforts have increased their sales. Companies that invest in strategic social media management see an average ROI of 420%. David leaned forward, his analytical mind engaging with the data. "Those are significant numbers. They represent a fundamental shift in how business gets done," Sarah continued. "The companies that adapted early to this shift are thriving. The ones that dismissed it as a fad are struggling to catch up. Your daughter recognized this transformation before most industry veterans did." Linda shifted uncomfortably. "But surely this is just a trend. Social media platforms come and go." "The platforms evolve, but the underlying behavior doesn't," Sarah interrupted gently. "People want authentic connections with the businesses they support. They want to feel like they're part of a community, not just consumers. That fundamental desire isn't going away, regardless of which specific platforms are popular." She clicked to the next slide, which showed ConnectCore's client portfolio and results. "This is what your daughter has built. Not just a social media management company, but a business intelligence operation that predicts consumer behavior, develops authentic brand narratives, and creates measurable economic impact for small and medium-sized businesses." Jenna watched her parents study the presentation with growing amazement. The metrics were impressive even to her. ConnectCore had helped their clients generate over $60 million in additional revenue over the past 3 years, had contributed to the creation of nearly 400 jobs, and had achieved client satisfaction scores that put them in the top 5% of marketing firms nationwide. "These restaurants, these fitness studios, these boutiques," David said, pointing to specific client examples. "These are real businesses supporting real families." "Exactly," Sarah said, "and many of them would have failed without effective digital marketing strategies. Your daughter hasn't just been posting pictures on the internet. She's been preserving livelihoods and strengthening local economies." Linda was studying a case study about a family-owned bakery that had expanded from 1 location to 5 after ConnectCore took over their social media strategy. This bakery, they went from 16 employees to 67 employees in 2 years? Because Jenna and Alex figured out how to tell their story in a way that resonated with their community, Sarah explained. They identified the emotional connection people had with traditional baking, developed content that highlighted the family history behind the recipes, and created a social media presence that made customers feel like they were supporting something meaningful rather than just buying bread. For the first time since the revelation, Jenna saw something that looked like genuine pride cross her mother's face. "The acquisition offer from TechVantage Industries," David said. "Is that typical for a company this size?" Sarah's expression grew serious. "Frankly, no. Companies ConnectCore's size usually see acquisition offers in the 5 to 15 million range. The fact that James Morrison is offering 50 million suggests they see something exceptional in your daughter's approach." She pulled up another slide showing TechVantage's acquisition history. Morrison's company has acquired 17 businesses over the past 5 years. Every single one of those acquisitions was based on identifying revolutionary approaches to established industries. They don't buy companies for their current value. They buy them for their potential to transform entire market sectors. "You're saying they see ConnectCore as potentially transformative?" Linda asked. "I'm saying James Morrison has built a $15 billion company by recognizing paradigm shifts before his competitors do. The fact that he's personally involved in acquiring your daughter's business suggests he believes ConnectCore represents the future of how businesses will connect with their customers." The room fell quiet as this sank in. Jenna could see her parents processing the idea that their daughter hadn't just built a successful business, but potentially a revolutionary one. "I need to share something personal," Sarah said, her tone becoming more intimate. "When I left my corporate marketing job to open the Daily Grind, my own mother was devastated. She had immigrated from Korea with nothing, worked multiple jobs to put me through business school, and couldn't understand why I would abandon a secure career to serve coffee to college students." Linda's attention sharpened noticeably. She saw my choice as a rejection of her sacrifices, as throwing away opportunities she had never had. It took years for her to understand that the opportunities she had created for me included the opportunity to take risks she had never been able to take. Sarah looked directly at Linda. "Your daughter has used the education, work ethic, and analytical thinking you provided to build something that didn't exist when you were making your own career choices. That's not a rejection of your values. It's an evolution of them." The observation seemed to hit Linda with unexpected force. For the first time since learning about ConnectCore, she looked at Jenna not with disappointment or confusion, but with something approaching wonder. "She really did this," Linda said quietly. "She really built all of this." "She did," Sarah confirmed. "And she did it while maintaining a 3.7 GPA and never asking you for financial support. She funded ConnectCore through part-time jobs, small business loans, and personal sacrifice. She's exactly as driven and dedicated as you raised her to be. She just applied those qualities to something you hadn't considered possible." David reached across the table and took his daughter's hand, the first time he had initiated physical contact since the revelation. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I'm sorry we made you feel like you had to hide this from us." The TechVantage Industries headquarters in San Francisco hummed with the controlled energy of a company that had revolutionized 3 different industries over the past decade. Jenna stood in the marble-floored lobby, adjusting her blazer for the 3rd time while Alex reviewed their presentation notes on his tablet. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of legal consultations, due diligence meetings, and family conversations that slowly rebuilt trust one difficult conversation at a time. "You ready for this?" Alex asked, though his own nervous energy was obvious in the way he kept checking his phone. "As ready as someone can be for the biggest business meeting of their life," Jenna replied, watching executives in expensive suits navigate the lobby with purposeful strides. "Did you ever imagine we'd be here when we were working out of that basement study room?" Before Alex could answer, James Morrison emerged from the elevator bank. He was younger than Jenna had expected, maybe 45. With the kind of confident bearing that came from making decisions that moved markets. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine, and his presence immediately commanded the attention of everyone within a 15-foot radius. "Jenna, Alex," he said, "welcome to TechVantage. Are you ready to see what we're building here?" The next 2 hours were a masterclass in corporate vision. Morrison led them through offices where teams worked on artificial intelligence projects, sustainable technology initiatives, and digital infrastructure systems that would power the next generation of business operations. But what impressed Jenna most was how Morrison discussed each project, not just in terms of profitability, but in terms of real-world impact. "This is why we're interested in ConnectCore," Morrison explained as they settled into his corner office overlooking the bay. "You've solved a problem that most companies don't even realize they have yet. You've figured out how to create authentic human connections at scale. And you've done it in a way that actually benefits small businesses rather than just extracting value from them." The formal presentation went smoothly. Alex handled the technical specifications, while Jenna focused on market analysis and growth projections. They had rehearsed this dozens of times, but presenting to Morrison felt different, less like a pitch and more like a conversation between people who understood the same fundamental truths about where business was heading. "Your client retention rate is unprecedented," Morrison noted, studying their metrics. 96% annual retention in an industry where 40% is considered acceptable. "How do you explain that?" "We don't just manage social media," Jenna said. "We become partners in our clients' success. When a client sees revenue growth, employee retention, and community engagement all improve because of our work, they're not going to leave for a company that offers the same services for 10% less." Morrison nodded approvingly. "And your employees? How do you maintain quality control across 3 offices with rapid growth?" Alex fielded this question, explaining their training protocols, performance metrics, and company culture initiatives. As he spoke, Jenna found herself thinking about the team they had built. Sophia, who had started as a part-time contractor and was now their head of creative strategy. Marcus, whose data analysis skills had become legendary among their clients. Jennifer, who could turn the most boring B2B company into an engaging social media presence. "We'd want to maintain your current team structure," Morrison said when Alex finished. "One of the biggest mistakes companies make in acquisitions is assuming they can improve on what's already working. Your people are clearly a huge part of your success." The conversation shifted to the formal terms of the acquisition. Morrison's offer had actually increased since their initial phone call, $55 million, plus equity stakes for both Jenna and Alex in TechVantage's digital division, plus guaranteed autonomy over ConnectCore's operations for the first 3 years. "There is one thing I'm curious about," Morrison said as they neared the end of the meeting. "Your parents. I understand this has been complicated for your family?" Jenna felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It has been, yes. But they're learning to understand what we've built here." "Actually," Morrison smiled, "I'd like to meet them. Not for business reasons. I'm satisfied with our due diligence on ConnectCore, but I think it might help them understand the caliber of what you've accomplished if they could see it from an industry perspective." That evening, Jenna called her parents from her hotel room overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. The conversation that would have terrified her a month ago now felt almost routine. "How did the meeting go?" Linda asked, and Jenna could hear genuine interest in her mother's voice, rather than the skeptical concern that had characterized their recent conversations. "Well, very well. Morrison wants to finalize the acquisition terms by the end of next week. And you're comfortable with their offer?" David's lawyer instincts had proven surprisingly helpful during the negotiation process, and Jenna had found herself genuinely grateful for his analytical perspective on contract terms. "More than comfortable. Alex and I will have operational control over ConnectCore, equity stakes in the larger company, and resources to expand in ways we never could have managed on our own." There was a pause, then Linda spoke again. "Morrison wants to meet us, doesn't he?" Jenna was surprised by her mother's perceptiveness. "How did you know?" "Because if I were acquiring a company from a 22-year-old, I'd want to understand their support system. Family matters in business, even when the business owner thinks it doesn't." "Would you be willing to meet with him?" "Of course," Linda said without hesitation. "We want to understand this world you've built for yourself. All of it." 2 days later, James Morrison sat in the daily grind with Dr. Linda Chen and David Chen, explaining the digital marketing industry with the same patient thoroughness he had used with institutional investors and board members. Jenna watched from across the cafe, amazed by the sight of her parents asking informed questions about market trends, competitive landscapes, and growth projections. "Your daughter has built something remarkable," Morrison told them. "But I think what impresses me most is that she's done it while maintaining the kind of ethical standards and community focus that most businesses abandon once they start scaling." Linda looked at Morrison with the direct gaze she usually reserved for surgical consultations. "You really believe this industry has long-term stability?" Dr. Chen, "The fundamental human need for authentic connection isn't going anywhere. The platforms may evolve, the technology will certainly advance, but the core of what ConnectCore does, helping businesses build genuine relationships with their communities, that's only going to become more valuable over time." As they shook hands at the end of the meeting, Jenna saw something in her parents' faces that she had been hoping to see for 4 years: unqualified pride in their daughter's achievements. The restaurant Dr. Linda Chen had chosen for their celebration dinner was a far cry from the sterile conference rooms and coffee shops that had hosted their most important family conversations over the past year. Canlis, perched on a hill overlooking Seattle's Elliott Bay, was the kind of place where business deals were celebrated and life milestones were honored. The soft lighting cast a warm glow over the elegantly appointed dining room, and the view of the city lights reflecting on the water created an atmosphere of quiet triumph. Jenna arrived first, wearing a navy dress that struck the perfect balance between professional success and family dinner. The past 6 months had transformed her in ways that went far beyond her bank account balance. The acquisition had been finalized in December, the team integration had gone more smoothly than anyone had projected, and ConnectCore was now the cornerstone of TechVantage's digital marketing division. But more importantly, she had learned to navigate success without the crushing weight of family disappointment. Alex arrived next, looking comfortable in the kind of expensive casual wear that successful tech entrepreneurs favored. He hugged Jenna warmly, and she was struck by how much their friendship had deepened through the process of building something meaningful together. "Jenny texted that she's running late," he said, settling into his chair. "Something about a college interview running long?" "Stanford," Jenna replied with a grin. "She's applying for their computer science program." Apparently, my unconventional career path inspired her to consider her own options beyond the pre-approved Chen family majors. Her parents arrived together, and Jenna felt the familiar flutter of nerves that still accompanied their family gatherings. But Linda's smile was genuine, and David was carrying a bottle of champagne, a gesture that would have been unimaginable during the dark days following her graduation revelation. "Sorry we're late," Linda said, kissing her daughter's cheek. "I had an emergency surgery that ran longer than expected. Sometimes the human body doesn't follow the schedule." It was such a normal parent comment, the kind of casual mention of work that characterized healthy family relationships. 6 months ago, Jenna's parents had known nothing about her professional life. Now, Linda regularly shared stories from the hospital, while asking informed questions about ConnectCore's latest client acquisitions. Jenny burst through the restaurant's entrance with the dramatic flair that only 17-year-olds could manage, her interview outfit slightly disheveled but her eyes bright with excitement. Sorry, I know I'm late," she said, sliding into the remaining chair. "But guess what? The Stanford interviewer used to work at a startup that got acquired by TechVantage 3 years ago. She knew all about ConnectCore and was super impressed when I mentioned my sister was the founder." "How did the interview go otherwise?" David asked, his parental concern evident despite his attempts to appear casual. "Really well, I think. We talked about the ethics of artificial intelligence, the responsibility of tech companies to consider social impact, and how computer science can be used to solve real-world problems rather than just generate profit." Jenny grinned at Jenna. "I may have mentioned that my role model is my entrepreneur sister who built a company focused on helping small businesses thrive." Linda reached across the table and squeezed Jenna's hand. "It's amazing how much influence you've had on your sister's thinking about career paths." The comment carried layers of meaning that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. Linda wasn't just acknowledging Jenna's professional success, she was recognizing her daughter's role as a positive influence on the next generation of their family. The sommelier arrived with the champagne David had selected, And as glasses were filled, Jenna found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The secret-keeping, the family conflicts, the terror of disappointment, the vindication of success, all of it had led to this dinner, where her parents were genuinely proud of her choices. "I want to make a toast," David said, raising his glass. "6 months ago, we thought we were celebrating Jenna's graduation from college. We had no idea we were actually celebrating the beginning of her career as one of the most innovative entrepreneurs in her field." "Dad," Jenna started to protest, but David continued, "Let me finish. Your mother and I have had 6 months to understand what you built, to meet the people whose lives you've changed, to see the respect you've earned from industry leaders. We've also had 6 months to confront our own assumptions about success, stability, and what it means to honor the sacrifices previous generations made." Linda nodded, her surgeon's composure softened by genuine emotion. "We raised you to be intelligent, hardworking, and ethical. We just assumed those qualities would lead you down the same paths that had worked for us. What we didn't anticipate was that you would use those same qualities to create entirely new paths." To Jenna, David continued, "For having the courage to build something meaningful, and for being patient with parents who needed time to understand that courage." They clinked glasses, and Jenna felt tears threatening for the first time in months. But these were tears of relief and gratitude, rather than frustration and disappointment. "There's something else we want to discuss," Linda said as they settled into their appetizers. "Your success has got us thinking about our own definitions of achievement and impact." Jenna looked up, curious. "I've been talking with some colleagues about starting a nonprofit focused on providing medical care in underserved communities," Linda continued. "Not the traditional charity model, but something more sustainable, using business principles to create healthcare systems that can support themselves long-term. And I've been considering a transition from corporate law to working with small businesses and startups," David added. "Companies like the ones ConnectCore serves, businesses that need legal guidance but can't afford the kind of firms I've worked for." Alex leaned forward with interest. "That's fascinating. The overlap between business sustainability and social impact is exactly what a lot of our clients are trying to navigate." "Which brings us to a proposition," Linda said, her tone shifting to the business-like directness that had made her a respected surgeon. "We'd like ConnectCore to help us develop the social media and community engagement strategies for these new ventures." Jenna stared at her parents in amazement. 6 months ago, they had been ashamed of her career choice. Now they were asking to become clients. "Obviously, we'd pay your standard rates," David said with a slight smile. "We wouldn't want any accusations of family favoritism affecting your professional reputation." "You're serious," Jenna said. "Completely serious," Linda replied. "We've spent 6 months learning about your industry, and we've come to understand that what you do, helping organizations build authentic connections with their communities, is exactly what our new ventures will need to succeed." Jenny raised her glass again. "Can I make a toast too?" Without waiting for permission, she continued, "To the Chen family, for finally figuring out that success comes in more forms than we were taught to recognize, and for being brave enough to support each other's authentic dreams instead of just the dreams we thought we were supposed to have." It was remarkably insightful for a 17-year-old, and Jenna realized that Jenny had been watching their family's transformation with the wisdom of someone who understood she was witnessing a fundamental shift in how they related to each other. As the evening progressed, the conversation flowed between business strategies, family updates, and dreams for the future. Linda shared her vision for sustainable healthcare systems. David discussed his interest in supporting immigrant entrepreneurs who faced the same challenges he had navigated decades earlier. Jenny talked about her college plans with the confidence of someone who knew her family would support whatever path she chose. "There's one more thing," Jenna said as they were finishing dessert. "James Morrison has asked me to speak at the TechVantage annual conference in September. It's a keynote address about entrepreneurship and authentic business development." "That's wonderful," Linda said immediately. "What an honor." "The thing is, he suggested that the speech focus on family support and how personal relationships affect professional success. He thinks our story, the conflict, the misunderstanding, and eventual resolution, might resonate with other families navigating similar challenges." David looked thoughtful. "You'd be comfortable sharing something that personal in a professional setting?" I think so. If it helps other families avoid the pain we went through, or helps other young entrepreneurs find the courage to pursue their authentic paths despite family pressure. Jenna paused. I think our story might be worth telling. We'd be proud to have our story told, Linda said firmly. All of it. The mistakes we made, the lessons we learned, and the success we achieved together. As they walked to the parking garage together, Jenna looked out over the city lights reflecting on Elliott Bay. 6 months ago, standing in her graduation gown, with her parents' words of shame echoing in her ears, she couldn't have imagined this moment. The successful business, yes, she had always believed in Connect Core's potential. But this version of her family, where her parents were genuinely proud of her choices and eager to learn from her expertise, had seemed impossible. Thank you, she said quietly as they reached their cars. For what? Linda asked. For being willing to change your minds. For admitting when you were wrong. For supporting who I actually am instead of who you thought I should be. Linda hugged her daughter tightly. Thank you for being patient with us while we figured out how to be proud of something we didn't understand. As Jenna drove home through the Seattle streets, she thought about the keynote speech she would give in September. She would talk about courage, the courage to pursue unconventional paths, but also the courage required for families to grow and adapt together. She would talk about success that includes both professional achievement and personal authenticity. Most importantly, she would talk about love that learns to be unconditional, even when it takes time to get there. The phone in her passenger seat buzzed with a text from Alex. Best family dinner ever. Ready to change the world tomorrow? Jenna smiled, typing back as she waited at a red light. Ready to keep changing it. Above the city, the stars were barely visible through the urban glow, but Jenna could see them if she looked carefully. Like her family's love, they had always been there, sometimes hidden by circumstances, but constant nonetheless, waiting for the right conditions to shine clearly again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.